Welcome all ROCS members, and we are going to be conducting another ROCS CME with our own eminent speakers. Very good afternoon to all ROCS members. I invite our lovely and respected President ma'am for the welcome speech. Maheshwari ma'am, please welcome Ms. Ji ma'am.
Thank you, Sarita. I welcome all the members, seniors, colleagues for this CME. We have started among ourselves to discuss interesting cases we have done. We have managed very nicely. And for the first case presentation, or rather presentation, I would like to call respected Dr. Purohit madam to speak on vomiting in pregnancy. Madam Purohit. Welcome Purohit madam. Welcome Sunita.
Because of COVID, we are meeting every week now. Thank
अच्छा
you, ma'am. Thank you very much. अच्छा है, definitely अच्छा है, and it's very comfortable. अपना खुद का घर में होते हुए, you can just meet each other. मैडम अच्छे लग रहे हैं.
टॉपिक इतने अच्छे हैं कि वेट नहीं हो रहा है हमसे. टॉपिक्स इतने अच्छे हमसे वेट नहीं हो रहा है. We are so eager to listen you. We are so eager to hear you, ma'am.
नेटवर्क की वजह से प्रॉब्लम. बाकी मैं अटेंड तो बहुत सारे किए मैंने अभी. So nausea, we are starting. Good morning all.
Good morning, ma'am.
Nausea, vomiting in pregnancy, and
Screen share करो रोहित.
तो दिखाई दे रहा है, स्क्रीन दिखाई दे रहा है आपको?
No, ma'am.
अच्छा, यहाँ तो दिखा रहा है.
मैम आपकी स्क्रीन दिखाई दे रही है, आवाज ठीक है?
बाहर आ रही है.
करोगे सबको दिखेगा.
Yes.
हाँ जी, अब दिख रहा है.
Yes. दिख रहा है रोहित अभी.
दिख रहा है?
हाँ दिख रहा है.
मैम दिख रहा है, सबको दिख रहा है.
फुल
Yes,
स्क्रीन
ma'am.
कर दो रोहित.
ठीक है मैम.
रोहित फुल स्क्रीन कर दो.
Yeah, it's.
ठीक है, आगे बढ़ा दो.
रोहित फुल स्क्रीन कर दो उसको.
सर F11 दबा दीजिए. F11.
F11 लगा दो रोहित.
लेफ्ट
अभी फुल स्क्रीन नहीं आ रहा है.
नीचे. So we are talking on nausea, vomiting of pregnancy, and then focus on hyperemesis gravidarum. So nausea and vomiting is the most common and first occurring disorder in pregnancy. We all are experienced of it. So how it is diagnosed? Nausea, vomiting of pregnancy. Its onset is in first trimester, and when the other causes of nausea and vomiting are excluded. It affects about 50 to 80% of the women. Now it is as high as 80%. And for the diagnosis of hyperemesis gravidarum, it is the away from the seriousness of the simple vomiting of the pregnancy, when there is a continuous pernicious vomiting and a woman is unable to do her day-to-day activity, so that, and there is more than 5% weight loss, electrolyte in any one of these things, and the dehydration, that is known as hyperemesis gravidarum. Its incidence is about 1 in 12,000. Risk factors are previous pregnancies with hyperemesis, nulliparity, that is common in the primary gravida, multiple gastrations, trophoblastic disease, gestational trophoblastic disease, greater body weight. Lesser is also, but more in the greater body weight. And it is more common in the industrialized urban area than the rural area. And risk is reduced when the advanced maternal age, more common in the earlier age groups. So simple nausea and vomiting, its onset is generally between 4th to 7th weeks of the pregnancy. Even when the period just missed, that it can start, and then its peak is about 9 to 10 weeks. If it initially starts after 10 weeks, then we must rule out the other causes, medical and the other causes. And this affects about 80% of the women. Management is the primary care outpatient basis, outdoor only, when there is no signs of dehydration. First is the reassurance. Reassurance, it is a common problem, so we should give the reassurance to the woman, and the support regarding the dietary advices. That is, she should not take anything liquid in the morning. As soon as she gets her, she should take dry carbohydrate diet, that is the biscuits or the toast, and after that fluid should be started. And if it is not controlled by the dietary regime only, then antiemetics are added. And the first line of antiemetics is the toxinamine succinate. It is anti-allergic and plus pyridoxine. It is safe, and generally all these cases are simple vomiting are relieved by this. And in severe cases, that is severe when she is having recurring, then it can be given in the night time, so she will be there in the morning. For diagnosis of hyperemesis, it is continuous vomiting. When it is not controlled, then it will be diagnosed, and of course the clinical condition will be there. She continuously curtailed from her day-to-day routine work, and there is weight loss, dehydration. Signs of the dehydration is present, and when dehydration is not controlled initially, then there is chances of the electrolyte imbalance. And the other effects, and this affects the severe form, it will affect 0.3 to 3.6% of the pregnant woman. Signs symptoms are mainly, these are the gastrointestinal, that is nausea and the vomiting, and the feeling of nausea, which gives the persistent sick feeling. So that is why known as morning sickness. Then there is chylism, that is excessive salivation, fatigue, weakness, dizziness, sleep disturbances, and there is hyperolfaction, that is सूंघने की शक्ति बहुत ज़्यादा हो जाती है. She smells a lot. And then there is dysgeusia, that is taste changes. Then the mood changes are also there. Sorry for interruption. We have to, for the diagnosis of excessive vomiting, pernicious vomiting, we have to see the signs of hyponatremia, that is electrolyte imbalance, and hypokalemia, hyposeruria, and raised hematocrit. Because of the hemoconcentration, loss of the fluid, the hematocrit value will raise. There is a ketonuria and severe metabolic acidosis. Thyroid function may be abnormal, and the liver function test. That is the transaminase raised. For the ambulatory daycare management, when there is a specific potent that is known as PQQE, that is pregnancy unique quantification score of MSS. Here it will come next. So if the score is less than 30, then we can give the ambulatory daycare management. That is the parental fluids, parental vitamins, and the parental antiemetics also. Inpatient management, when there is a persistent vomiting and the potent is also high, then or any one of these factors are present, that is continued nausea and vomiting, inability to keep down oral antiemetics, associated ketonuria and weight loss despite oral antiemetics, and other causes are excluded. That is confirmed suspected UTI. Then there is a inpatient. Patient has to be admitted, and here the management goals will be: first, they determine the severity. How much is the severe? Then first, they correct the hypovolemia, reduce the symptoms, and prevent complications. These are our aims. So for severity detection, there is a specific potent which is known as pregnancy unique quantification of MSS score. It is an objective and validated measure the severity of nausea and the vomiting. This score index is total 3 questions are asked, and these questions are: first is in the last 24 hours, for how long have you felt the nauseated, feeling of the nausea? Then in the last 24 hours, how many times you have vomited, that is out. And third is the last 24 hours, how many times have you had a retching sensation, or without only the sensation without bringing the anything. And these scores are given accordingly. So if she has no vomiting then at all, then it will be 1 hour or 2 like this. So lastly, if it will become 7 and more, so total score here is the 30. And it is evaluated. If it is less than 3, then that can be managed. More than 30, she has to be admitted in the hospital. And the hospital admission, we have to do the urine analysis, ketones for the infection first cells, electrolytes, hyponatremia, hypokalemia, hypochloremic, and creatinine for the renal functions. Full blood count for infection, anemia, that is hematocrit, and the TSH value. Blood glucose monitoring. Blood glucose monitoring to exclude the diabetic ketoacidosis. Or of course, first we have to confirm by the sonography, viability as well as to exclude multiple pregnancy and the trophoblastic disease. This we do at the management. Medications that are used are the vitamins, that is the pyridoxine, antiemetics. First line or the A category is the doxylamine, chlorpromazine, metoclopropamide, and ondansetron. These are the second drug, metoclopropamide, second category, and the antacid, acid reducing agent, that is omeprazole, antihistaminics, diphenhydramine, herbal medication, that is the ginger, and the corticosteroids. We include late if she is not responding. Then safety of the drugs. First line we always give antihistamine, that is doxylamine, succinate, and plus vitamin C, B6, pyridoxine. Second line is the metoclopramide, ondansetron, and the combination of the drugs when there is no response to single agent. And third line is the corticosteroids when standard therapy has failed. Ondansetron is the 4 milligram to 8 milligram BD to QID intravenously. It is a category B drug, but we have to give in the hyperemesis. Metoclopramide, this is also category B. This is given 5 to 10 milligram BID to QID. Promethazine, this is helpful. It also acts as an anti-allergic. 12.5 to 25 milligram intravenously or intramuscularly, BD to QID. I also add these tablets orally in simple nausea vomiting. Then the granisetron. This is 1 milligram diluted in 5 ml slow intravenously. Granisetron is given. Then adjuvant therapy and the acid reducing agents are omeprazole 20 milligram twice daily and dehydration therapy. Simultaneously, first we have to control the vomiting also and correct the dehydration. So initially, choice of solution is the Ringer lactate. We should not start with the dextrose solution because it will further aggravate the condition. So we start with the Ringer lactate solution, or normal saline can also be given with the addition of the potassium chloride. And then after this correcting hypovolemia, then the 5% or the 10% glucose is given for the correction of the maintaining the hydration. And infusion rate should be adjusted to maintain the urine output more than 1 ml per kilogram body weight per hour. Dehydration therapy, dextrose infusion to be avoided in initial replacement. Just now we are told we should start with the Ringer lactate. And because of the Wernicke's encephalopathy, it causes further deficiency of B1. So we should start with the Ringer lactate and then we can switch to after correcting the condition. So continuous hydration is then maintained with the dextrose containing solutions and the potassium supplementation. If hypokalemia is severe, then potassium is added to IV fluids to achieve a concentration of 40 milliequivalent per liter. Supplements, thiamine should be given 100 milligram intravenously initial replacement, then 100 milligram daily for 2 to 3 days. Oral thiamine 50 milligram only. Multivitamin infusion only daily. In refractory cases, such as liver function tests are increased, particularly serum aminotransferase seen in 50% of the indoor patient, amylase, anti-lipase, ABG, absolute metabolic disturbances, monitoring the severity. So refractory management, we have to give the hydrocortisone, 100 milligram intravenously BD, which is category C. But in severe cases, we have to add it. Then we will switch to, when she is corrected, we are switching to oral feeding. Then we can switch to oral tablets also. Tablet hydrocortisone 50 milligram BD. Injection thiamine and then oral thiamine for 2 weeks. And monitoring urea, serum electrolytes, input output charts, and avoiding iron preparation. Thromboprophylaxis with low molecular weight heparin can be given unless it is contraindicated. If in spite of all these measures, if she is having persistent dehydration or electrolyte loss, weight loss, all major nutrition supplementation, alternative methods have to be chosen. Enteral route is indicated. Standard method is via total parenteral nutrition, and the risk of sepsis, bacteremia, thrombosis is there, of course, and nasogastric tube placement with enteral feeding. This is also preferred method. And here we have to, it is a diagnosis of effusion. Other causes, medical, surgical, and the gynecological, should also be looked for, like peptic ulcer, cholecystitis, gastroenteritis, hepatitis, pancreatitis, genitourinary conditions, neurological conditions, drug-induced, certain gynecological conditions like twisted ovarian cyst or the degenerated fibroid. Some complementary therapy is also tried, but it is not proved whether they are effective or not, like the ginger lollipops, ginger tea, acupressure techniques, but not much proof, but they can be tried. Regarding the effect of ginger for nausea and vomiting in early pregnancy, conclusion is that in spite of widespread use of ginger in the diet, its clinic value and safety profile is still unknown, and it is not much effective also. This is also the reference for the same. Acupressure may be useful for the management of multiple symptoms in the variety of the population. That can be included in that. Dietary, of course, there is. Initially, blood rest and the triggers should be avoided. And regarding the dietetic advised, early in the morning, dry carbohydrate diet, and then fluid should be taken sufficient, and then eat before as soon as hungry. Slowly and small quantities of the food, at least 2 to 3 hours, that is 5 to 6 at a daily. Frequent small meals. Avoid coffee, spicy, odorous, and high fat, high sugar food. Substitute with protein dominantly, and the salty or the bland food should be added in the diet. Other suggested food include herbal preparations, unbuttered toast, frozen desserts, and pre-conception use of prenatal vitamins may decrease the nausea and vomiting of the pregnancy. Fluid should be consumed in small quantities. 30 minutes before or after the solid food to minimize the effect of frequently washing mouth, brushing mint flour and the toothpaste. Complications are Burkitt's encephalopathy, which is a triad of symptoms, that is mental confusion, ataxia, and ophthalmoplegia. Eye complication starts. Esophageal laceration with metabolic. It is known as Metabolic syndrome. Renal dysfunction, oliguria followed by anuria, central venous thrombosis secondary to dehydration. So we should diagnose these conditions earlier. In the hospital patient, that is patient is come to hospital. These complications should not occur. If these complications start, we should take the another option, that is the termination of the pregnancy. Although it is not needed nowadays, it is controlled earlier. Psychosocial effects are feeling that the caregiver did not realize her condition. So hospital admission is always required in both cases. She also fear of the subsequent pregnancy. She thinks that this will recur in the next pregnancy also. And she has the negative attitude towards that pregnancy. Post-traumatic stress difficulty, there is also difficulty in the milk secretion, and the marital issues are also there. Fetal outcome generally, if it is controlled early, then the fetal outcome will not be affected. But if it is controlled late or the patient comes late sometime, then there are chances of preterm birth, low birth weight baby, and when the hyperemesis gravidarum manifesting first time in the second trimester, then there is a increased risk of the preeclampsia. Transfer to higher center. It is needed, tertiary level care is needed when there is a presence of hematemesis or the neurological complications like altered sensorium, refractory cases requiring parenteral nutrition, parenteral enteral nutrition, and renal failure. But these are the very late cases, and these conditions generally do not occur at present scenario. Very less. Finally, the how to algorithm. First, the PU-PUQ82. That is pregnancy unit quantification of emetic score. If it is 3 to 12, there is no ketonuria. Anti-emetics of the first line, that is doxylamine, and dietary changes will be quite effective. If it is more than 30, no ketonuria, then also ambulatory day care will be affected, but she will require second line of anti-emetics, that is the oral or the parenteral, and she will require parenteral hydration. And if it is more than 30, ketonuria is present, then she requires inpatient management and second line of the anti-emetic plus steroid. And rehydration therapy plus the thromboprophylaxis also required. References are so before completing, I would like to just share in few times 2 cases. One was from both were from the Ratnam only, quite long back. One patient come to me in the, I have not written here, just I am telling, about 14 weeks pregnant, 16 weeks of the pregnancy. I was third person whom she contacted. Her vomiting used to control. Previously to visited 2 persons. Her vomiting used to control, but again started. So she visited me. All her investigations were normal. Thyroid functions were normal, and the fetal growth was also normal. Her problem was she can't be admitted. Even so much vomiting, I gave her IV fluids, everybody advised, but she was not admitted. So I allowed at home. She continued with IV treatment and recovered. And recovered for 1 week, and again after 1 week started. This continued. As soon she started solids, she started vomiting. So in the same way, she continued with the pregnancy. Her weight didn't increase, but she didn't develop any complications. And then up to 28 weeks, she continued with no weight gain, but fetus was good. She was off and on taking IV fluids, anti-emetics, intramuscularly, then orally like this. Then after 28 weeks, now the IUGR started. I told her for the admission, enteral feeding, but she didn't agree. And ultimately, she delivered in 33 weeks at the government hospital. But luckily, baby was fine. So this was neither a simple vomiting nor hyperemesis, but she continued. So lots of cases are also like this. One case, just in few minutes, she was 40 years old, and she was having 3 children, and tubectomy had been done. Then her one male child died, and after that, recanalization was done. Recanalization was done, and we had the Baroda, and they told her to become pregnant as early as possible. So after that 3 months, she just had her LMP date. That is, she has not aged at all because her period used to come 2 days earlier. So that month period doesn't came. So she started severe vomiting, severe nausea, not the vomiting, severe nausea. And she came to me and said she is pregnant. I did her test, UPT, it was negative. But she was having so much nausea that I have to give the injectable. After 3 days, I advised for blood serum pregnancy test. That was also not negative. But she continued severe nausea, and the vomiting also started. I have to admit her. And then once I told her that she is not pregnant, sonography also advised. And then after 1 week, she recovered. So everybody is saying so. Personally, I think that the neurogenic element is also very high in these patients. So whatever may be the cause, the neurogenic element always comes in the picture. So this is the
Hello. Thank you, Purohit ma'am, for such an informative lecture. I would like to invite Dr. Sunita Badhwani, consultant OBGY, Ratlam Hospital. She is having a special interest in critical care. Kindly unmute yourself. I request all members. Kindly unmute yourself. Badhwani ma'am. Hello. I request all members kindly unmute themselves.
Hello.
Mute them.
Just start.
Just I'm trying to share my slide, Sarita.
Yeah, ma'am. Yeah,
Welcome, Sunita ma'am.
Yeah,
But there is a lot of
Sarita.
disturbance in the presentation.
Good morning, Sarita.
I request everyone to turn off their mic, please. Sunita ma'am, please start.
Can
Welcome, ma'am.
everybody see my screen? Can you see my screen, Priya?
No, ma'am. No, ma'am.
Can
We
everybody
can't
see my
see your. No, ma'am. We are unable to see.
Just a minute. Just a minute. Can everybody see?
No, you're not visible.
Not, ma'am. Not yet.
Meanwhile, you can ask, take question answers from the chat box, Rita.
Can everybody
Yeah,
see us?
ma'am.
No, you're not visible,
No,
Sunita.
ma'am.
Good morning. Good morning, Joshi madam.
Good morning, ma'am. Welcome, ma'am.
चल छोड़, तू भी तो इधर खड़ी है, तो Hello.
Hello. Yes, Sunita, ma'am. It is started. Yeah, ma'am. I request to all Rocks members kindly unmute yourself, please.
Now mute yourself.
Mute yourself.
Can you see my screen?
Badwani, ma'am, any issues? You are facing any issues?
Sarita, you can see.
No, ma'am. We are screen
Sarita?
पे नहीं आ. Yeah, ma'am. Hello.
हाँ.
मैम नहीं दिख रहा है स्क्रीन पे. हाँ, मनीषा मैम नहीं दिख रहा है ना स्क्रीन पे. मुझे तो नहीं दिख रहा है.
नहीं. She is not visible.
She is not. No, ma'am. You are not visible.
Just
For meanwhile, your screen is visible. पर अभी disappear हो गया.
just a minute.
ये स्क्रीन शेयर कैसे? नहीं अभी मैडम ने करा था ना, रोहित मैडम ने जैसे.
हेलो मैम, वो एप्लीकेशन विंडो में जाइए आप, फिर उसमें से शेयर करिए.
मेरा भी लैपटॉप ही है ना, लैपटॉप पे ही है ना.
हाँ सर, लैपटॉप पर ही.
जब आपका वही बंद है तो कहाँ से दिखेगा?
क्या?
जब स्क्रीन
नहीं, स्क्रीन शेयर, हाँ हाँ, एप्लीकेशन विंडो उनसे पूछो, पूछो।
मैम एप्लीकेशन विंडो पे क्लिक करके नीचे शेयर बटन आएगा, फिर शेयर बटन दबाइए।
शेयर बटन में वो एक्चुअली जो हमारा स्क्रीन है दैट इज नॉट बीइंग सीन। जस्ट अ मिनट, आप बोलो ना।
अच्छा, पहले स्क्रीन दिखेगा मैम आपको एप्लीकेशन विंडो में, फिर आपका शेयर बटन दबाना।
हाँ हाँ, हाँ, पीपीटी शेयर करना पड़ेगा, ऑप्शन नहीं आ रहा है उसका। एक्चुअली वो डेस्कटॉप पे खोलना पड़ेगा बेटा उसको, पीपीटी को उसको क्रोम पे ही खोले तो नहीं पता। हाँ डेस्कटॉप पे, तो देखो इसमें मेरे को दो ऑप्शन आ रहे हैं, योर एंटायर स्क्रीन और एप्लीकेशन विंडो।
एप्लीकेशन विंडो पर जाओ,
ठीक है,
नाउ शेयर दैट।
अब दिख रहा है?
हाँ, अब दिख रहा है मैम। You are visible, ma'am.
Yes, yes.
Okay, you can
Yeah.
start, ma'am. Okay.
Yeah, sorry for the inconvenience. This is my case presentation. Should I start, Sarita?
Ma'am, yeah, ma'am. You proceed.
Good morning, everybody. Good morning, everybody, and sorry for the delay.
No, ma'am. ठीक है.
Yeah. This case of mine was a 26 years old woman. She was G2, P1, and D1. Her first pregnancy was full-term SB 4 years back. That was because of PIH. And she had delivered at PHC. This time, she had conceived with infertility treatment at my place with ovulation induction and IUI. She had conceived with twin pregnancy. Patient was on irregular ANC checkup. She was a very sincere patient, but because of the lockdown and the COVID situation, she was consulted telephonically in her last few months of pregnancy. Pregnancy profile, the investigations were within normal limit, and she had an uneventful ANC period, except for a bit of anxiety, which was very obvious because of her bad obstetric history. At 34 weeks pregnancy, during the lockdown, patient had come to our OPD with complaint of nausea, vomiting, and decreased fetal movement, and lots of anxiety. Her temperature, pulse, everything was, the physical examination was very much under normal limits, except for her BP was 140/90. Her uterus was overdistended for 34 weeks with multiple fetal parts because of twin pregnancy, and both the FHS were normal. The USG with Doppler was advised, but because of COVID situation, Doppler was not being possible. So they gave a normal USG pregnancy report of twin live fetuses with breech lie at present corresponding to 31 weeks, 3 days and 31 weeks, 4 days, plus minus 1 week. NST was done and was, hello?
Ma'am, you are audible,
Yes,
ma'am.
Sunita,
I'm audible.
Ma'am, you are audible. Continue, ma'am.
Yeah,
You are
yeah.
audible.
USG pregnancy report was twins live fetus with breech lie at present corresponding to 31 weeks, 3 days and 31 weeks, 4 days. Her NST was done, which was normal and very much reactive. All blood investigations were within normal limit, but as patient was very anxious and she was admitted in view of decreased fetal movement with bad obstetrical history. Because she had bad obstetrical history, we had started her on steroids for lung maturity and Maxilf regime for neuroprotection. On 8th, she was admitted. 8th of June, she was admitted. On 10th of June, we got a call from ward that patient was complaining of no fetal movement. And patient was very, very, very anxious. I told sister to do her NST. NST was done, which was relatively non-reactive. I mean, it was completely no beat to beat variation, no accelerations were seen. So we decided to take her for an emergency LSCS, which was very much uneventful. A very routine LSCS was done. She had 1.6 kg and 1.5 kg male babies extracted out, cried well, and shifted to NICU under pediatrician's care. Patient was shifted to post-op ICU. Regularly, we are shifting our patients to a recovery ICU for 12 hours and then shift the patient back to ward. So same thing was done for her. Intra-op and post-op. Her BP was constantly raised. It was between 150 by 100 to 170 by 114, which was managed constantly by the anesthetist in the OT and the intensivist in ICU. She was given template amlodipine, injection Lasix, IV mannitol, IV Fortwin, injection Campos, everything what was possible. By 3 a.m., she was very comfortable. As it is, patient didn't have any complaint from her side. I mean, like since the time her operation was done and she got to know that she has got delivered 2 normal male babies, she was very comfortable, very happy, and very patiently attending all the instructions. But by 3 a.m., her BP was controlled and we went to sleep. At 7 a.m., I got a call from ICU that while changing the pad, patient had a bout of cough. Her SpO2 was low and it came down to 75%, which was normal throughout night. She had a sudden tachycardia of 140 beats per minute. We both rushed to ICU. She was auscultated. Bilaterally, there was extensive crepitations. Lasix 40 milligram IV was given. An X-ray technician was called for. Chest X-ray was done, which showed bilateral extensive haziness in lower zone, which is suggestive of pulmonary edema. We asked for 2D echo, and in 2D echo, this is what we saw. Her heart was not contracting. You can see both the hearts. Like I'll say, this was the first one, which we are seeing is on 11th when she was post-op period, and this was after 5 days. The contractility of heart had reduced significantly. There was left atrial and left ventricular dilatation with global hypokinesia with 25% ejection fraction. With this diagnosis of peripartum dilated cardiomyopathy with pulmonary edema, patient was managed. She was managed with the help of intensivist with strict hemodynamic control. NTG infusion was started. Dobutamine infusion was given. Lasix infusion was given. Higher antibiotics, digoxin and Carnisure. Her investigation, as we can see on this slide, on 8th of June, when she was admitted, all her investigations were very much under normal range. On 11th, her investigation deranged altogether. Just after this 2D echo and X-ray, we called for blood investigation, and her blood investigation showed low platelet count, raised WBC count, and liver profile was also increased in the form of bilirubin, SGOT, SGBT, all significantly raised. So with this investigation in hand, the diagnosis of dilated peripartum dilated cardiomyopathy with pulmonary edema with initial HELP syndrome was made, and she was managed very efficiently by the intensivist, the help of cardiologist in our city, and senior physician. She was very efficiently managed by the medical team, and she was discharged. Constantly, patient was managed with the help of physician, cardiologist, intensivist, and it was because of the teamwork and the available in-house facilities. Patient was discharged on day 10 with left ventricular ejection fraction of 45% and healthy twins. Timely diagnosis, meticulous calculated constant management, and proper communication and cooperation of the patient was the key to success. Sarita? Hello?
Yes, Sunita.
Have you completed?
Ma'am,
Hello?
we have few slides of cardiomyopathy. If you can permit, we'll continue with them.
Yeah,
Yeah, ma'am.
continue.
Yeah, continue.
Little
Continue,
discussion
ma'am.
on dilated cardiomyopathy.
Yeah, ma'am.
This is a few slides related to peripartum cardiomyopathy. What is peripartum cardiomyopathy? It has 4 significant points which are necessary to call some patient to have dilated cardiomyopathy. That it develops, there is a development of heart failure in last month of pregnancy or within 5 months of delivery. Absence of another identifiable cause of heart failure. Absence of pre-existing heart disease. Left ventricular systolic dysfunction with ejection fraction not more than 45%. The etiology it is not clear what is the main reason behind this peripartum cardiomyopathy. What the suggested theories say, there is inflammation in the musculature of blood vessels and heart which may be responsible. There can be viral myocarditis. There can be abnormal immune response of the mother towards the baby. Hormones, particularly the progesterone, the high level of progesterone that is seen in pregnancy can be the cause in few patients. It is genetic. It is very much seen that if a patient has dilated cardiomyopathy or peripartum cardiomyopathy, and we have inquired with the patient, it is shown that her mother, her sisters do have that possibility of having the same disease in family. There can be abnormality of hemodynamic response. The heart has to function 1.5 times during pregnancy. That is in every pregnancy. But in few of the cases, it is shown in the form of peripartum cardiomyopathy, malnutrition, and apoptosis. The risk factor are twin pregnancy, which was there in my patient, high parity, which was not there, high gravidity, extremes of reproductive age. It is seen in very young patients and very old patients. It is commonly not seen between in the 25 to 30 years of pregnancy age is considered as more safe for PPCM. Prolonged tocolysis is one of the cause. Preeclampsia, which was again there in my patient, though it was a very short-term preeclampsia, but it was definitely there. Genetics, obesity, socioeconomic status. Low socioeconomic status people have more possibility of PPCM. African people have it more, but even Asians show it more than what we see in Americans. Cocaine abuse, malnutrition, hypertension, and smoking. Presenting symptoms are paroxysmal nocturnal dyspnea, dyspnea on exertion, orthopnea, chest pain, cough, palpitation, and hemoptysis. Signs can be tachycardia, tachypnea, regular or irregular pulse, persistent neck wing distension. The jugular veins can be very prominently seen in these patients. BP normal or can be decreased. If patient goes for dilated PPCM, patient has decreased BP thereafter. Bilateral basal crepitations, S3 and S4 gallops, mitral holosystolic murmurs, hepatomegaly. But most of the symptoms and signs which are seen in this patient resembles more to your regular pregnancy and PNC period. And that is the reason we fail to diagnose this patient in time. The differential diagnoses are anemia, which is very common in our area, thyroid disease, septicemia, idiopathic dilated cardiomyopathies, accelerated hypertension, myocardial infarction, acute pulmonary embolism, severe preeclampsia, pulmonary vasculitis, and valvular disease. Management, as far as management concerns, it is all a teamwork of obstetrician, the cardiologist, the intensivist, and the anesthetist, and not last but not the least, even the pediatrician. The aim of treatment is alleviating the symptoms, slowing the progress of LV dysfunction, and improving survival. Particularly, all the three factors are more important in ANC period if the patient has this PPCM during her ANC period. Treatment of PPCM is acute treatment in form of oxygen, diuretics, vasodilators, antiarrhythmics, inotropic agents, mechanical ventricular support. All the rest is not possible at our place. Mechanical ventricular support, anticoagulation, pentoxifylline, intravenous immunoglobulins, and bromocriptine. There is a very important role of bromocriptine. That is what they say, but it is still under study. And bromocriptine is given, then baby cannot feed. So that is the twist. That is the reason we didn't give bromocriptine to this patient. Chronic treatment is lifestyle modification, diuretics, RAS blockers, beta blockers, anticoagulation, cardiac synchronization therapy, implantation cardioverted in defibrillators, and cardiac transplants. Delivery, as far as delivery of this PPCM patients is concerned, it can be a normal delivery, which is more preferred. LSCS is generally reserved for obstetrical indications. Early delivery not required if condition is stable. Epidural anesthesia is preferred, and breastfeeding should be avoided due to potential effect of prolactin subfragmentation. Advice during discharge to patient is daily fluid intake from 1 to 1.5 liters. Avoid heavy work and aerobic exercises. Permanent contraception. Even we advise our patient, she had only one live pregnancy, but we advise her to take good care of the patient, babies, because she is not supposed to have any more pregnancies henceforth. Nutritional supplementation, contact doctor if any features of common cold or RTI, because they don't have a difference between breathlessness because of this heart disease or because of cold. So contact doctors if any features of common cold or RTI. If possible, light exercise like walking. Breastfeeding now discouraged for more symptomatic patients. Follow-up of the patient in the form of electrocardiography or echocardiography at rest or low-dose dobutamine stress test after 6 months. There is actually less data about discontinuation of the drugs, but if patient improves, then after 6 months, gradually tapering down the dose of drugs up to 12 months. Clinicians' opinion on continuous AC inhibitor and beta blockers up to 2 years. We have continued these 2 drugs in our patient. Prognosis of patient, good prognosis for other forms of dilated. All the other reasons for dilated cardiomyopathy has bad prognosis, but this particular, if treated well in time and appropriately, has good prognosis. 50% of patient completely recovers, 25% of patient persistently have symptoms, and 25% of patient develop complication, progressive heart failure, arrhythmias, and thromboembolisms. Mortality is 3% to 9.6%. Patient with consistent cardiomyopathy after 6 months, mortality rate is 85% in 5 years. Thank you.
Thank you, Badhwani ma'am, for sharing your knowledge. Ma'am, question answer बाद में ले सकते हैं हम? Definitely. Now, I would like to invite next speaker, Dr. Shefali Shah. She's a consultant OBGY at the Ridhan Hospital, and she's a laparoscopic surgeon and special interest in infertility. Shefali ma'am, can you hear me?
Yes.
Are you
Thank you,
ready with
Sarita, for the. Yeah, sure.
Yeah, ma'am.
Thank you,
You can
Sarita.
proceed. Yeah, ma'am. Thank you.
Thank you, Sarita, for
Welcome.
your kind introduction. And USG in early pregnancy is a topic which is very close to my heart because I just love to do sonography, as it is the third eye of an obstetrician. And I'll just share my screen just a minute. Can you see my screen?
Yeah, ma'am. We are able to see.
Thank you.
Shefali ma'am दिख
we
रहा
will
है.
Okay. USG in early pregnancy. Just a second. So first of all, in USG in early pregnancy, we will just go to the basics of ultrasonography because we should know as an obstetrician. So ultrasounds are sound waves with frequencies higher than the upper audible limit of hearing. It is the reflecting back of the sound waves which produces an image on ultrasound, and it uses frequencies of sound waves ranging from 2 to 18 megahertz. Now, echogenicity. Echogenicity is a term which is normally used in ultrasound, and it has hyperechoic, hypoechoic, and anechoic nomenclatures. So hyperechoic is something which is more white as it reflects majority of sound waves, example bones. Hypoechoic is less white as it is less dense and reflects less, example amniotic fluid in third trimester. And hypoechoic is a comparative term. As for example, if we take the uterus, if the uterus is hyperechoic, we can say, then the fibroid in it is hypoechoic. It is a comparative term. Then we come to anechoic, which is completely black. It does not reflect at all and lets all the sound waves to pass through. Example, bladder and follicle. Now the transducers and probes. As we all know, there are 4 probes: linear probe, convex or abdominal probe, cardiac probe, and vaginal probe. And what we are concerned with is the abdominal probe and the vaginal probe. So the abdominal probe is a low frequency probe and has a frequency of 3 to 5 megahertz. It has a poor resolution because it has a low frequency, but it can go to a little more depth and it has a good overview. But we need to have a full bladder for an abdominal probe. Now we come to the vaginal probe, which is a must for all obstetricians and gynecologists to use it. It is a high frequency probe with 5 to 7.5 megahertz. It has a superb resolution, but it has a poor overview. If we are going to do a TVS, we can't see the abdomen, the liver, the gallbladder. We can't see that because it has a poor overview. And we don't need to have a full bladder. We can do it with an empty bladder. Now the safety issues. When we do a ultrasound in a pregnant woman, we need to know the safety issues of an ultrasound machine. And there is something called the thermal index. The thermal index of our machines should be less than 1 in order to do it on a pregnant patient. And the safest of the modes is the B mode, followed by the M mode, followed by color Doppler, and then the power Doppler. So color Doppler and power Doppler should be avoided in first trimester until and unless it is very much indicated. So we should stop using color in first trimester if it is not required. Now we come to USG in early pregnancy. The things we will deal here are gestational sac, yolk sac, fetal pole, crown ram length, and the dating scan. So the gestational sac is the first evidence of pregnancy, and it is visible as early as 4 weeks by TVS. At 4 weeks, the gestational sac has a diameter of 4 mm. It grows at the rate of 1 mm per day. It is eccentric in location, and it is usually embedded in the endometrium. It is identified by the double decidual sign. So here you can see the gestational sac. It has a thick rim around, and it is quite well defined. and the small thing seen inside is the yolk sac. Now, empty gestational sac or blighted ovum. A gestational sac contains a yolk sac at 5.5 weeks of pregnancy if we do a TVS. If the diameter of the gestational sac is 16 to 24 mm, it should have a yolk sac. And if it does not have a yolk sac, it is called a blighted ovum. Or if the diameter of the gestation sac is more than 25 mm and it does not have a fetal pole, it is a blighted ovum. So this is an empty gestation sac, and you can see that it is looking quite bigger. It is 30 mm in diameter, but it is not containing any yolk sac or fetal pole. Now the yolk sac. The yolk sac is a thing which is often missed by us. So a yolk sac is a small structure and it is imaged at 5 to 5.5 weeks of gestation, and it is usually imaged 3 to 5 days prior to embryo. So if we do a sonography at around 5 to 5.5 weeks, we will see a yolk sac, and it is not necessary that we should see an embryo at the same time. At 10 weeks, generally, it has the highest diameter of 6 mm and it disappears after the first trimester. And you should not have a yolk sac more than 6 mm. If it is abnormally large, it is indicative of an abortion or congenital anomalies. So we should always keep in mind that a yolk sac should not be more than 6 mm. Now we come to the fetal pole or fetal node, which is our favorite. It is visible between 5.5 to 6.5 weeks of pregnancy, and it looks fantastic on a TVS. It is usually present near the yolk sac. It is identified by the presence of a fetal heartbeat. The most common thing that we use to identify it is the fetal heart. Fetal heart can be identified when the fetal node is 5 mm or more at about 6 weeks of gestation. At about 7 weeks, the fetal pole is 1 centimeter or 10 mm. So this is only for us to remember that at 7 weeks, it will be of 1 centimeter or 10 mm. Fetal pole should be visible when the gestation sac is between 16 to 24 mm, and a gestation sac of more than 25 must have a fetal node. Now you can see this. This is a gestation sac, well defined, with a fetal pole in it and a yolk sac lying very near to each other. Now we come to the crown rump length. Crown rump length is a way to measure the fetal pole, and it is the most important parameter for dating of pregnancy. It is measured in the mid-sagittal view of fetus and with the fetus in the neutral position. By neutral position, we mean that the fetus is neither hyperflexed nor extended. There is a space between the chin of the fetus and the chest of the fetus, and we should see amniotic fluid in between both the margins. Care should be taken that the yolk sac is not included in the measurement. Fetus should fill more than 2/3 of the screen, and measurement should be from the outer skin of the crown to outer skin of the rump. So this is how we measure the crown rump length, from the outer skin of the crown to the outer skin of the rump. And the fetus should lie in the horizontal position and filling 2/3 of the screen. It should neither be hyperflexed nor hyperextended. And in case of 6 to 9 weeks of pregnancy, sometimes the baby may be hyperflexed. In that case, we can measure the neck rump length, because sometimes we can't avoid flexion of the fetus. Now we come to the dating scan. Dating scan, ideally the pregnancy should be dated by crown rump length between 10 to 13 weeks of pregnancy. That is when the CRL is between 30 mm to 84 mm. Pregnancy scan for the first trimester, for the first time between 14 to 24 weeks of pregnancy should be dated by head circumference and femur length. Pregnancies beyond 24 weeks should not be dated, and pregnancy should not be dated before 6 weeks of pregnancies. Previously, we used to say that the earlier the scan, the more accurate is the dating, but this is not correct. Before 6 weeks, we should not date the pregnancy, because it may cause there may be an abortion before 6 weeks, or there may be a delayed conception. So we should date the pregnancy only when we can see a clear crown rump length. That is the way of dating. Now, the key points which we have to remember today is that gestational sac is visible as early as 4 weeks by transvaginal ultrasound, and the gestational sac grows at the rate of 1 mm per day. A yolk sac more than 6 mm is abnormal. It may be indicative of an abortion or a congenital anomaly. Fetal pole is visible as early as 5.5 weeks, and we can identify it by the presence of heartbeat. Crown rump length is the most important parameter for dating, and it should always be used for dating. And TVS should be liberally be used for first trimester imaging. Thank you. Thank you, and I wish a happy imaging to everybody.
Hello.
Hello.
Thanks, Shefali ma'am. Hello. Thanks, Shefali ma'am, for sharing such wonderful information about the UH. Yeah, ma'am. This is very necessary for the gynecologist. जैसे भीम के लिए गधा वैसे ही gynecologist के लिए USG है. Okay, ma'am. Ma'am, we will take the question answer. So, if any member having a question, just put down. Unmute yourself.
Sarita, I would like to comment.
Yeah, ma'am.
I would like to comment.
Yeah, ma'am. You sure. Proceed, ma'am.
All the three presentations were very nice and informative. I thank especially Madam Purohit Madam for quickly agreeing for presentation. And I want to add that in cases of intractable vomiting, my experience is that we should use anti-anxiety drugs like alprazolam also. So the patient anxiety जैसे ही कम होती है उसको वैसे ही vomiting में भी बहुत फर्क पड़ जाता है.
जी.
And Dr. Sunita, case presentation of peripartum dilated cardiomyopathy was very well managed successfully. And I think it is mainly due to early detection, prompt treatment after investigation, and overall the teamwork saves the maternal mortality. Dr. Shefali very nicely described the basics of obstetric scan in the first trimester and how to start doing first trimester pregnancy scan. तुमने इतना अच्छे से बताया कि कोई भी start कर सकता है उसको देख के.
हाँ, कोई भी कर सकता है.
Thank you.
Question किसी के? Our eminent speaker are waiting for the questions. If anybody having any questions, just put it down.
Madam Joshi, good afternoon. Please unmute yourself, madam.
I request unmute yourself, all members.
Madam, you are not audible. Please unmute yourself. Madam,
डॉली मैम भी नहीं दिख रहे. मैम ने अनम्यूट नहीं किया शायद. दिखा रहे हैं.
डॉली मैम इज आल्सो नॉट विजिबल.
क्या से लीला जोशी मैम दो फोन्स पे है.
अच्छा.
Okay, that's why.
जैसे वो
another CME was going on na on the fibroid. That's why. Ma'am is visible now.
Ma'am, we can see.
Good afternoon, ma'am. Very warm welcome from us.
Good afternoon, ma'am. एक डिवाइस हटा दीजिए वहां से. जो डिवाइस आप यूज कर रहे हैं बस वो वाला डिवाइस रखिए. दूसरा वाला हटा दीजिए तो आपका आवाज आएगा. आपका आवाज नहीं आ रहा है. मैम का
आवाज नहीं आ रहा है.
Arjun, can you unmute from here?
नहीं मैम, अनम्यूट तो वहीं करना पड़ेगा. आई कैन म्यूट एवरीवन बट आई कैन नॉट
अच्छा,
अनम्यूट एनीवन. उसमें एक काम
ओ,
करें, तो सीरा जोशी मैडम को बोल दीजिए कि वो कोई व्हाट्सएप पे या तो अगर कोई जो मैसेज होता है, वॉइस मैसेज होता है, वो बना के अगर भेज दे मुझे या किसी को भी, तो वो फिर वहां पे प्ले कर सकते हैं.
okay, ठीक.
चैट बॉक्स में
Anybody
कोई
having?
क्वेश्चंस हैं क्या?
नहीं मैम,
अच्छा,
नहीं कोई क्वेश्चन.
पुरोहित मैम है क्या? मैडम नहीं दिख रहे हैं.
पुरोहित मैम नहीं दिख रहे हैं. डॉली मैम है?
हाँ
हेलो डॉली.
हाँ.
हाँ मैं हूँ.
गुड मॉर्निंग मैम.
Yeah, ma'am.
मैम क्वेश्चन पूछिए ना.
Question पूछिए.
आपके हाथ ही नहीं आ रही.
अरे यार मैं फंसी हुई हूँ ओटी में. एक पेशेंट लेबर में, फुल डायलेटेशन में, कंसेंट नहीं दे रही है सीजर के लिए.
सबसे कॉमन प्रॉब्लम है गायनेकोलॉजिस्ट, कंसेंट नहीं देते सीजर की. जी मैम. थैंक यू मैम फॉर जॉइनिंग अस.
सुनीता, एक क्वेश्चन याद आया.
जी मैम.
पेरीपार्टम कार्डियोमायोपैथी में ब्रेस्ट फीडिंग क्यों अवॉइड करते हैं?
मैडम प्रोजेस्टेरॉन का फ्रेगमेंटेशन होता है एंड दैट इज रिस्पॉन्सिबल फॉर कार्डियोमायोपैथी. मतलब कहते हैं दैट इज व्हाट इज द स्टडी गोइंग ऑन. द स्टडी इज नॉट कंप्लीटेड बट recently they have started saying to avoid in case of severe, if the patient is not becoming stable. जैसे हमारा वाला patient had become stable. day 1 को उसका जब ejection fraction देखा था that was 25%. Day 7 को उसका ejection fraction has risen to 45%. and अभी वो day before yesterday आके गई और उसका ejection fraction was more than 55%.
Good.
So she is improving well. So we are not giving her any anti breastfeeding advices. But if the patient is not improving, progesterone has something to do with increasing the damage of myocardial dilatation. That is what they say.
This is very new information, ma'am. We don't know that.
And that is the reason we are using bromocriptine in these patients. If the patients are not getting better, we are using bromocriptine, which has to be, which reduces the breast secretion.
Okay.
Ma'am, my question is कि 2D को सभी को कराना चाहिए क्या, हाई रिस्क पेशेंट को?
Yes. This is what I wanted to discuss. After this particular incident, I had a talk with many gynecologists and the cardiologists, and everybody's opinion now is we should do screening 2D echo in every patient.
Every patient or ma'am high risk patient?
No, every patient.
Every patient.
Because like in our setup, what we have started is screening at a very low rate, because patient who is paying for ultrasonography can very much pay for screening of ultrasonography. Bare minimum charges we are taking, and we are screening every patient for echo. 2D echo is done for every patient, and this 2D echo is done mainly in 3rd trimester of pregnancy.
3rd trimester.
Sometimes what happens, this cardiomyopathy has no risk factor. Patient को पहले से कुछ नहीं रहता है और suddenly during labor she goes into cardiomyopathy, and such cases they can be detected prior by echo. मतलब कैसे उनका 2D echo कैसे हेल्प करेगा ऐसे पेशेंट्स में?
मैडम अगर कोई एलिमेंट है, pregnancy is a high risk condition in itself. अगर पेशेंट को बेसिकली कोई valvular disease है या cardiomyopathy है which has developed but not increased, तो उसका normal phase तो उसका perfect चल रहा था till the time she became pregnant and she went into labor. But during labor, because of the increased stress to the heart, these elements are shown. So particularly in the patient whom we can afford and whom we can monitor, we should be monitoring. This is a 2D echo and an ECG. Because of increasing age of pregnancy and the increasing level of stress, even MI is very common in females. Like they have undiagnosed MI which goes undiagnosed, and they have certain ischemic changes in the heart. which they are unaware of. And during pregnancy, because of the the hemodynamic changes and all the stresses of
Hemodynamic.
delivery, that thing becomes reflective.
Okay.
So the take-home message for us, ECG and 2D echo, screening 2D echo should be done in the antenatal exam, antenatal screening. Okay, ma'am. Thank you, ma'am. Thank you so much.
Is Purohit ma'am there?
Shefali ma'am, are you there? Purohit ma'am
Yes,
is
I
not
just
there,
wanted-
I think.
Okay.
Shefali ma'am is there. Hello,
Yes,
Shefali
I
ma'am.
am here. Yes,
My
I am here.
question is with you. मैम
Yes.
CRL को मोस्ट एक्यूरेट बोलते हैं जेस्टेशनल एज के लिए. अभी ये
Yes.
चेंज हुआ है क्या? आपने बताया मेरे को, अभी बताया था.
Yes, yes. Actually, in the
डेटिंग
guidelines,
के
it is
लिए क्या मोस्ट एक्यूरेट क्या है मैम?
dating के
कौन
लिए
सा टाइम?
8 to 13 weeks of pregnancy पे you should do the crown ram length for dating, because gestation sac का size is often misleading. So crown ram length at age between 8 weeks to 13 weeks. Most important 10 to 13 weeks.
तो for the dating we are use the CRL for 8 to 10 weeks.
8 to 13 weeks के बीच का जो अपना अल्ट्रासाउंड में जो
ओके मैम, ओके मैम, ओके मैम, थैंक यू, थैंक यू. Anyone else having any questions? Purohit ma'am.
I just wanted to comment one thing, Dr. Sunita.
Yeah.
See, the routine use of 2D echo in early pregnancy when the patient is anxious and when there is tachycardia is probably not indicated. It is indicated after the second trimester. That is in the
it is in the final trimester. Final trimester.
It's a final trimester, third trimester. Ma'am mentioned
an early late trimester or a late trimester.
Yeah, it is in the third trimester. What we are doing right now is in third trimester we are screening for every damn patient. Right, and this is what is, I mean, like my friends in Bombay are also doing the same. They have suggested me that we are doing 2D echo in third trimester for every patient.
Yeah.
Okay.
So my patient hasn't given me consent as yet. I have to wait till 2:15.
Because yeah, मैम तो अच्छा है ना, आप हम लोग के साथ.
Our best wishes are
आप हमारे साथ हैं मैम.
One more thing, in hyperemesis, I use insulin. I mean, like the neutralized IV fluid, DNS with insulin 10 unit, and that gives a very good result. In hyperemesis, there is hypokalemia, and this hypokalemia is mainly in the intracellular space. And because of this neutralized saline, the potassium which is outside the cell goes inside it, the channels open up, and patients really show, I mean, at times when you don't get good results with normal antiemetics, as soon as you stop antiemetics, they start having vomiting. So I give this neutralized saline, and which is very, very effective. Any experience of seniors with this?
No, I haven't used this, but I use meclizine hydrochloride.
Yeah, it is even, that is very good.
It is antihistaminic, but it is very useful.
Very useful.
I'm very comfortable with it.
Definitely.
Definitely.
Ma'am, what is the role of low molecular weight heparin in hyperemesis, as madam said?
There is वहाँ पे concentration, hemo concentration हो जाता है ना, तो increased risk of thrombosis, vascular thrombosis. Okay. And to prevent that, we should give prophylactic LMWH.
Okay.
Anybody
Anything
else? No, ma'am. Kari, ma'am. Hello. Anybody having any questions?
Regarding antiemetics, I just wanted to ask all the seniors, what is their experience with antiemetics? Which antiemetic acts the best? Like we usually in the first trimester, we usually give doxylamine, succinate, and pyridoxine. After that, what is the first choice?
See, I don't prefer giving ondansetron because additionally it causes constipation also.
Yeah.
So I give prochlorperazine metoclopramide more.
that should be preferred. And that should be given SOS.
It is
Not
not a first
SOS.
line.
Not
It is not a
SOS.
first line. It is given
Yes.
afterwards. So first line is only our
We were missing you.
This is second line. This is second line.
Okay.
Not when it is not.
नहीं पुरोहित मैम, हम लोग जैसे डॉक्सिलामाइन सक्सिनेट और पायरिडॉक्सिन तो शुरू से दे रहे हैं and we usually continue it till 12 weeks. What should be given after that?
Also, they say that it should not be given continuously.
Okay.
Continuously, it should not be given.
Okay. So we should not give doxylamine succinate and pyridoxine as a first time prescription to everyone.
Not as a routine.
Not
If
as a
she is if she is having complaint, then we should give.
Okay.
Manisha ma'am,
Yes.
I will take. I want to take your permission, ma'am. Close करें कि
हाँ,
और
close
अभी कोई
करें।
discuss-
खाली
जी
ये बताना है कि
अभी किसी
28
का
को
कुछ जी ma'am.
28 अभी जुलाई में ROCS is hosting a CME on medico legal aspects in obstetric and gynec practice और पूरी MP की सब societies उसमें invited रहेंगी. So I request all of you to attend that and Dolly will be the master of ceremony and please सब लोग join करें उसको. लिंक और टाइम में भेजूंगी.
जी मैम.
जी मैम.
Thank you, Dee.
Okay,
Thank
welcome.
you,
Thank
ma'am.
you.
Thank you,
Thank
Manisha
you,
ma'am.
Thank you everybody.
Okay.
Thank you सारे ROCS
Bye-bye.
members के लिए.
Thank you,
Bye-bye.
madam. Thank you very much on behalf of the pharmacist also,
Thank you,
madam.
Arjun.
Thank you, Arjun, for conducting
Thanks a lot,
such a
Arjun.
Thank you so
Thank you,
much.
such a
madam.
good academic test for us. Thank you, Arjun. Thank you, pharmacist. Thank you,
Thank you,
Manisha
madam.
ma'am. Thank you, Neha ma'am,
Thank
taking all
you.
pain of it. Or all senior members. Thank you for joining us. Okay. Should we leave the meeting, ma'am?
Yes.
Yeah.
Bye-bye.
Good day. Bye-bye. Good day. Bye-bye.
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 Bye. Thank you.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Thank you all of
Bye.
you.
Bye.
Thank you, Arjun. Thank you.